Hey guys, how we doing? Unfortunately, I don't have any guitars in my AD office that you guys can check out, but I guess you can look at the basketballs or trophies back there. Anyway, my article was called "Russia and China: Converging Responses to Globalization." So what it essentially did was it talks about Russia and China's willingness to, in recent years, cooperate with one another and come to an understanding with one another, and maybe establish business networks, trade, and just having a better understanding of each other's countries and their ways of operation, and a lot of their shared goals and shared opinions, particularly when it comes to the West. So, starting, it really talked about in 1991 and right around there how both countries took a very different path when it came to their economy and political systems, as we talked about in class yesterday. Russia tried to go, full head, you know, with the full head of steam into democracy, and maybe they did that without putting a lot of thought into exactly how they were going to do it. And we talked about the different reasons why it really failed. They also tried to go full go into capitalism, which led to a few oligarchs at the top really controlling much of the economy. China had a different approach starting in the 90s. They had more of a planned economy with some private aspect to it, privatization, but definitely no political freedom. They didn't go down the road of democracy. But both of them, in their different paths, have definitely become more globalized as far as its economic approach and its goals, and when it comes to imports and exports and things of that nature. But China has definitely had more success when it comes to Russia. Um, in 1993, they had about the same size economy as one another, and by 2003, China had three times bigger uh, an economy than Russia in just that 10-year period. They grew three times as large as Russia did. So, and that's impressive for China, given the fact that they sort of had a late start when it came to being involved in foreign markets and being on the global scale. They both have definitely sort of emerged as countries that have increased their service sector, but they did it kind of in different ways. China emphasized on becoming heavily industrialized, and they shifted a lot of their agriculture resources into industry, whereas Russia had a huge industrial base, throughout the Cold War and with their massive, buildup of their military and things of that nature. They declined that industrial sector and shifted more towards like a service type economy, and that alone has contributed to a lot of economic growth for China in comparison to Russia. And I think they've adapted a lot better, as a global economy, and has become a larger player when it comes to global economics. But both have increased world trade. Russia actually trades more to developing countries, where China trades to more or exports more to developed countries with a lot of the finished goods that they've made or produce. You know, Mostly the United States. And both also have high foreign exchange reserves, which allow them to be a little bit more deferential to the West, giving them more economic autonomy. Both are definitely paranoid about the West, I would say, and the West's role in their economy. They want to be, separate from the West. They want to be able to make their own decisions. They want to be able to go against advice of the West or the World Trade Organization or whoever, and they really, want to be able to make their own decisions. The article then went in to talk about, both countries are pursuing policies that they say are typical of developmental states, and the characteristics that those would be state-directed long-term economic development, state mobilization of resources within a market economy, and political authoritarianism. And both countries' governments definitely play a crucial role in determining the direction of economic development. The differences are, in China, they granted individuals and institutions to meet, you know, the needs of anything they might need, to meet unmet needs. They did not go into a quick overhaul into like a full blown market economy. They sort of wanted it to expand slowly. So, it was a guided democracy, is what they called it. Develop democracy within the party and then have it spread outward. And China, maintained control of a lot of the really large institutions, um, but local authorities had some autonomy, at least more so than Russia, when it came to smaller industries. I mean, the state definitely controls a lot of the larger, more essential industries, but China definitely went down the path of allowing some local control and having some free market principles, sprinkled in, even though it was more of a planned economy. Russia definitely pursued rapid privatization. So unlike China, who kind of gradually went that route, Russia, as we talked about, went full go into free market economy, and it led to a lot of problems. A few people at the top that had most of the power and the money, and that led to Putin kind of reversing much of that, and he aimed to restore state control and reduce the influence of these oligarchs, and that's led to a lot of Russia's issues today when it comes to Putin in particular. Um, in China, it says when Deng, and I'm sorry, I will not be pronouncing this correctly, but Deng uh, Xiaoping, when he initially encouraged liberalization, and he actually originally expressed support for the democracy wall protests, but um, that never actually happened as far as putting that into place. China has remained uh, very much authoritative when it comes to its politics, and they've allowed for some more economic freedom, definitely. But even that was kind of guided and slowly released to the public. So both countries definitely have a lot of state control. Even though their paths have been different, their paths have definitely been different from the early 90s into today. They, have become more comparable as far as their relationship with one another and what they believe in. They're both very critical of Western ideas. They look to each other for advice and cooperation. And China, in particular, the article stated it wants to avoid dependence on the West, and they don't want to change their ways because of foreign pressure, whether that be the World Trade Organization or other major economies around the world attempting to make them change for whatever reason. So China has always been very skeptical of that. Russia's attitudes have fluctuated more with the West. In the 90s, they were very much pro-Western when Yeltsin was in power, but Putin has reversed course on that. So both of these countries are definitely, I would say, against the West at this point, or at least are very hesitant in doing business with the West and trusting the West fully. So, China and Russia, while they do have some similar ideas when it comes to the West, they have some conflicting interests as well that the end of the article talked about, and you know, they eventually, could come in conflict with one another for some of the conflicting interests that they have, but their sharing of ideas about the West have led, to a climate of closer cooperation between the two. And it's interesting just to see how that'll develop further in the years coming, um, moving into the next few years. So yeah, that's what the article was about. If you have any questions, we can discuss it more on Tuesday when I return. I'll talk to you guys later.